Did I see Jayson pull the trigger? Yes, I saw him pull the trigger.
Jayson Williams, born February 22nd, 1968. Jayson Williams played basketball like somebody trying to prove something every single possession. Diving on the floor, throwing his body into rebounds, screaming after loose balls, flying around the court with a level of aggression most players couldn't sustain for an entire game, let alone an entire career. In the 1990s NBA, that style made him easy to love. Fans saw toughness, coaches saw effort, teammates saw energy, but looking back now, it almost feels like basketball was the only place where his chaos was being rewarded instead of punished. Because long before the shotgun incident that changed his life forever, the warning signs were already there. Stories of fights, reckless behavior, alcohol problems, and emotional outbursts followed him from college into the NBA. Yet, as long as he was rebounding, hustling, and helping the Nets win games, most people brushed it aside as part of his personality. And to be fair, Williams did become far more successful than many expected. He wasn't viewed as a franchise-changing superstar coming into the league, but he still became an all-star, signed a massive contract, and turned himself into one of the most recognizable power forwards of his era. But eventually, the same recklessness that made Jayson Williams successful on the court began destroying everything around him off it. And by the time basketball could no longer protect him, the damage had already gone far beyond the game. What happened? Let's talk about it. Salute to K-Romance on IG for this request. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth. Let's get it, man. Like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know who I should do next. Jayson Williams was a 6'10" power forward from Ritter, South Carolina, who grew up between New York and New Jersey before becoming one of the toughest rebounders in basketball. At St. John's University, he built a reputation as an emotional, physical player who played every possession at full speed. That intensity helped him become one of the better forwards in the Big East, but even then, there was already stories about fights, confrontations, and a personality that could become difficult to control. Still, in the late 80s and early 90s, basketball culture often celebrated players who looked fearless and unpredictable as long as they produced on the floor. Williams entered the 1990 NBA draft and was selected 21st overall by the Phoenix Suns before his rights were quickly traded to the Philadelphia 76ers. After 2 seasons in Philadelphia, he landed with the New Jersey Nets, where he slowly developed into one of the league's best rebounders. Williams was never a polished scorer or franchise superstar, but he carved out an NBA identity through hustle, defense, toughness, and non-stop energy. During the 96-97 and 97-98 seasons, he averaged over 13 rebounds per game and became one of the emotional leaders of the Nets. In 97-98, he averaged 12.9 points and 13.6 rebounds, while earning his lone NBA All-Star selection and an All-NBA third-team nod. By that point, Williams had become one of the most recognizable players in New Jersey. Fans loved the effort, loved the personality, and loved the intensity he brought every night. But while his basketball career was reaching its peak, the reckless behavior and emotional instability that had followed him for years never truly disappeared. Stunt number 1, basketball rewarded his recklessness. From the outside looking in, Jayson Williams was exactly the kind of player 90s basketball fans loved. He played hard, rebounded everything, threw his body around without fear, and carried himself with the kind of emotional intensity that made people believe he cared more than everybody else on the floor. Every team wants energy guys, every fan base falls in love with hustle players, and for a while, Williams turned that reputation into a highly successful NBA career. But looking back now, it's hard not to notice how often the warning signs were ignored because his aggression still benefited the game of basketball. Even before becoming an NBA All-Star, Williams already had a reputation for losing control emotionally. During his time at St. John's, there were stories involving fights and confrontations that hinted at a deeper anger problem beneath the surface. But in that era especially, overly aggressive athletes were often romanticized instead of questioned. Coaches wanted dogs, and fans loved players who looked crazy competitive. If a player dove into the crowd, screamed after rebounds, or played with reckless emotion, people viewed it as passion instead of instability. Williams fit perfectly into that culture. Once he reached New Jersey and became a productive player, the image only grew stronger. The Nets embraced him because he played harder than many of the stars around the league. He became known as a blue-collar player, willing to sacrifice his body every night. But away from basketball, stories involving reckless behavior, partying, alcohol, and confrontations continued following him throughout his career. In multiple interviews after retirement, Williams himself admitted alcohol had become a major part of his life during those years. Instead of slowing down once he made money and became successful, his lifestyle only became more extreme. The difficult part about telling Jayson Williams' story is understanding that the same traits helping him succeed on the court were quietly damaging him off it. And because he was producing at a high level during the late 90s, very few people around him had reason to seriously confront the behavior while the NBA success continued rolling in. Basketball didn't expose Jayson Williams' instability at first. In many ways, it rewarded it, and by the time the game could no longer protect him from himself, years of reckless behavior had already become normalized in both his personal life and the people surrounding him. Stunt number 2, the injury ended the structure. For all the chaos and recklessness that followed Jayson Williams throughout his life, basketball at least gave him structure. Practices, games, teammates, travel schedules, coaches, expectations, and the physical exhaustion that came from playing one of the toughest styles in the NBA every single night. As long as the season kept moving, there was always something directing his energy somewhere productive. But in 1999, that structure disappeared almost instantly. And looking back now, that may have been one of the most important turning points in his entire life. On April 1st, 1999, Williams suffered a devastating leg injury during a game against the Atlanta Hawks after colliding with teammate Stephon Marbury. The injury was gruesome enough that his career was essentially over the moment it happened. Williams underwent surgery immediately, with a plate and screws inserted into his leg. After missing the entire following season, he officially retired in 2000 at just 32 years old. For most players, retirement is difficult, but for someone like Jayson Williams, whose entire identity revolved around physical intensity and non-stop emotional energy, the transition appeared especially dangerous. What makes this part of the story important is that Williams didn't slowly fade out of basketball over several seasons. His NBA life stopped abruptly. One day, he was an NBA All-Star and emotional leader playing in packed arenas, and shortly after, he was sitting at home with a massive contract, an injury, fame, free time, and far less accountability that he'd ever had before. At the time of the injury, Williams was only in the first year of a 6-year, $90 million contract extension with the Nets. Financially, he was set for life, but mentally, the structure that once kept him grounded seemed to disappear overnight. As the years after retirement went on, Williams' lifestyle reportedly became increasingly reckless. Drinking remained a major issue, partying continued, and his personal life grew more unstable. Instead of the NBA world surrounding him every day, he now spent more time isolated inside a massive New Jersey mansion, while still carrying the same impulsive personality that had followed him since college. The difference now was that basketball was no longer there to absorb or redirect that energy. That's what makes his career-ending injury feel bigger than just a basketball moment. It wasn't simply the end of an NBA career. It may have been the moment the one thing giving Jayson Williams purpose, structure, and discipline disappeared completely. And once that happened, the reckless behavior that had quietly been building for years no longer had anything holding it in place. Stunt number 3, the shot that erased everything. By 2002, Jayson Williams had already retired for nearly 2 years, but the reckless lifestyle surrounding him never truly slowed down. The parties, the drinking, the large mansion, the celebrity status, the unpredictable behavior, all of it continued growing after basketball ended. And on February 14, 2002, everything finally collapsed in a single moment that permanently erased his identity as a basketball player in the eyes of the public. That night, Williams was at his 30,000 square foot New Jersey mansion after hosting a charity basketball event. Among the people there was 55-year-old limousine driver Kostas Gus Christofi, who had driven members of the event earlier in the evening. According to reports and testimony from the case, Williams was showing people around the mansion when he handled a shotgun that discharged and struck Christofi, killing him. Williams claimed that the shooting was accidental, but what happened afterward became just as damaging to his reputation as the shooting itself. Investigators later accused Williams of trying to cover up the incident by instructing others at the scene to help make the shooting appear accidental in a different way. During the trial that followed, testimony painted a picture of confusion, panic, alcohol, and recklessness inside the mansion that night. In 2004, Williams was acquitted of the more serious charges, though the jury deadlocked on reckless manslaughter. He was convicted on multiple counts connected to covering up evidence at the scene. Years later, after appeals and additional legal proceedings, Williams eventually pleaded guilty to aggravated assault in 2010 and served only 18 months of a 5-year sentence. The tragedy instantly changed the way the public viewed him forever. Overnight, the former NBA All-Star became known nationally as the basketball player who shot and killed his limo driver. The rebounding titles, the All-Star appearance, the hustle reputation, and the popularity in New Jersey all disappeared behind one horrifying headline. And because Williams had already built a reputation for reckless behavior long before the shooting happened, many people looked at the incident not as an isolated mistake, but as the inevitable result of years of instability finally reaching a breaking point. Jayson Williams didn't lose his legacy because he declined as a basketball player. He lost it because one reckless moment destroyed multiple lives at once, including his own. From that point forward, no matter what he accomplished in basketball beforehand, the shooting became the first thing attached to his name forever. All in all, Jayson Williams' story is one of the rare stunted growth stories where basketball success almost hides the real tragedy underneath it. Because unlike many former prospects who never made it, Williams actually reached the top of the sport. He became an all-star, signed a massive contract, and turned himself into one of the most recognizable players in New Jersey basketball history through pure effort and intensity. But the same reckless personality that helped build his basketball identity eventually destroyed lives around him once the game was no longer there to contain it. After prison, Williams publicly battled alcoholism, legal troubles, depression, and personal struggles for years. There were reports involving suicide scars, arrests, and substance abuse long after the shooting itself. Even decades later, controversy still followed his legacy, including public criticism from members of his own family after St. John's honored him in 2022. Today, younger fans barely remember the rebounding machine or emotional leader the Nets once embraced. Instead, most know him from one horrifying night that permanently changed multiple lives. Basketball made him famous, but ultimately it couldn't save him from himself. Salute, much respect, but for these reasons, his growth was stunted. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth, and I'm out.